Insulation foam is a good start for a track saw support. This is 2-inch insulation foam, but it's a little bit too soft, it's a little bit too floppy, and it won't really support a 4x8 sheet of plywood. So I want to make that better. I'm going to start by improving the sawhorses. I'm just going to put some 4-foot pieces of wood on top of these kind of flimsy metal sawhorses, just using some lag screws. I'm just using some lag screws to put the 4-foot pieces of wood on top of the sawhorses. So that makes them better, but by themselves, that's not quite enough. You'll see in a second here. Here I'm just routing off the edge so I don't have a sharp edge and making sure I don't make a climb cut. So by itself, these extra pieces of wood help these sawhorses, but the foam is still a little bit too sloppy, I think. Here you can see it still kind of flops a little bit. It still bends a little bit when it's on there. So I'm going to make some 7.5-foot long supports that'll go under the foam and support it really well. This is my wood pile. This is some scrap wood from a deck that got replaced. It actually turns out to be really nice wood. It's Ipe, a Brazilian walnut, as I understand it. Here's a 20-foot piece of it sticking out of the back of my pickup truck. I cut the pieces down to 7.5 feet, did some milling on them, and then I want to mill the ends of them a bit because I'm going to put a little plastic dovetail connector called a Keilverbinder on the end of each of the boards. So there's 3 boards. I'm going to mill 2 ends on each of 3 boards, so that's 6 ends I've got to mill. And these little Keilverbinders are a dovetail connector. They will slip in and out of slots that are routed on the pieces that go horizontal. So these are the vertical pieces. I'm just doing a little bit of milling on the end of it. And I just moved this out to the loading dock just to give myself room to vertically clamp these boards onto the workstation. I'm using the shaper origin to mill a little mortise plus some little tiny starts for pilot holes for the screws that'll hold these little Keilverbinder dovetail connectors on. You're going to see this is an awful lot of moving equipment around in Falderall for some really pretty tiny little mortises. And in hindsight, I probably didn't need to do that. I probably could have had the Keilverbinders on the ends of the boards without the little mortises. So I'm kind of really wasting my time here. But it did work, and you'll see they're pretty secure because the little dovetail connector is going to sit down in a small mortise on the end of the board. I've got to flip the board over, obviously, to do the other end. And there's the little mortise and the start for the pilot holes. And that mortise is shaped the same, and it's the same size as the Keilverbinder. I think it's 2 millimeters deep, which equals this little lip that's on the Keilverbinder. You'll see I'll slip it in there in just a second. You'll be able to see what it looks like. And there it is in place. So it's held on by 5 screws. Obviously, those screws line up with the little starts for the pilot holes I made. So now I've got to do the slots and the horizontal pieces. For this, I'm using the shaper plate. There's just a mark on the plate where the slot's going to go. There's a digital file for the slot, and it gets cut with a special dovetail bit that you have to buy if you're going to use these Keilverbinders. Here I am cutting the slot, and this is actually speeded up from real time. I think this is twice actual speed. You just want to go really slow because this dovetail connector is really buried in the wood. So if you make a mistake with the shaper origin router that I'm using, it automatically pops up and pulls out of the wood. Well, if it did that in the middle of a dovetail, it's going to wreck the dovetail. So you've got to go really careful or you're going to wreck a piece of wood. I did make a measuring mistake with these, and this is actually routed a bit too deep. It's just an error I made when I measured the depth of where that router was going to cut. They actually worked, but they were a little bit hard to insert, so I just took a belt sander, sanded down the board so that it made those slots a little shallower. Obviously, you couldn't use that correction on, anything but some shop furniture. I don't really care how it looks. Here I am finishing the pilot holes. I've got them in exactly the right spot. This wood, I've got this Ipe wood, is really tough. It was really hard to drill these pilot holes. And I broke off a couple of screws. I actually broke a couple of drill bits drilling out the pilot holes. And it absolutely has to have pilot holes, or the screws are not going in this wood. It's much too tough. So the upper one is already screwed in, and there's a place where I think I broke a drill bit off in that hole, so that's why there's an X and no screw in that one. I used some wax on the screws to try to make them go in a little bit easier, but it was still a struggle because this wood is just so hard and dense. So I'm putting these, I've got 3 vertical boards and 2 horizontal, and so I've got 6 of these connectors, one on either end of the 3 boards. And here I'm laying the thing out. You can see I'm in no hurry. It takes me just about a minute to set the thing up from start to finish, even though I'm, moving slowly and almost tripping. The idea here, of course, is to have a convenient way to do track sawing, but not have a huge 4-foot by 8-foot table in the middle of the workshop at all times. So with this system, with no tools and just these little Keilverbinder connectors, I can click the thing together in about a minute, put the foam on top of it, and be ready to track saw it pretty quickly. This is in real time, by the way, so it's not speeded up like everything else in this video. And it took me about a minute to put the whole thing together. You just have to line up those slots, and they just slip right in there. It holds it plenty firm. I thought I might have to make a diagonal cross piece to keep this from racking, but it was really pretty strong, and I don't think it needs any more reinforcement, and I just don't want another piece to have to mess with. It's just easier and faster, the fewer pieces there are. So then the foam goes on, and it's ready to track saw in maybe a little over a minute, but I was in no hurry to set it up. And then I'll show you also in real time, how I take it down. So this is Workshop Improvement of the Week. If you liked it, please hit the like button. I'll have other ones coming up every week until I run out of things to do, which is probably going to be a while. So subscribe if you want to see more of these little projects. Appreciate you watching. Thanks very much. Bye.